guys, it's your girl Virgo Queen here, and you are watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate. Todd has been involved in covering the sport of mixed martial arts since the 1990s, and Miguel has been the matchmaker for over 200 events worldwide. Please subscribe to the channel and be on the lookout for future episodes. In the meantime, you can catch me here on TikTok at Virgo Queen, one and only. Thanks.
You're right.
All right, this is Todd Atkins. I'm here with Miguel Iturrate, and you know, always fun to do shows with Miguel. I think this is going to be another one because we're kind of talking about this, kind of how the California Athletic or the California State Athletic Commission had said they were going to delay voting on the Ali Act, and then all of a sudden they just kind of passed it overnight when no one was paying attention. And so, before we get into this, make sure you subscribe, watch. We're one of the few channels out there that tries to give you explanations as to why stuff happens rather than just what happened. And, Miguel, I wanted to give you kind of a chance to give your opening thoughts on this kind of passing of this overnight, like undercover darkness, so to speak.
Well, you know, it's been years and literally years, more than a decade, that Dana and his entourage, whether it was Fertitas or now the Endeavor people, have been talking about backing and going into boxing and fixing boxing and doing all this stuff. And there was speculation that, obviously has been wanting to change the Ali Act for a long time. There was a lot of speculation recently that Dana wouldn't answer, but as to whether he would even get into boxing if he can't execute a change of the Ali Act, right?
Right.
So um here it starts, and this is one of those, you know, very interesting situations here where Dana at this point, and when he started, it wasn't this way. But when he started in MMA, Dana had the Fertitas, and the Fertitas are still obviously they're famous, and they're billionaires and they're casino owners and stuff. But many people may or may not remember that Lorenzo was actually a member of the Nevada Boxing Commission.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so they've always had a backdoor into the boxing commissions, And here's a billionaire in what I assume would have been a voluntary role in the Nevada Boxing Commission. I mean, I'm sure that the boxing commission in Nevada is big enough that they have a couple of salaried employees, maybe, a secretary, the commissioner, a couple of people, Andy Foster in California would probably also qualify as a salaried employee of the state. And he's probably got an office and, maybe an assistant and things like that. Those offices probably carry 10 or 12 people on a salary. But then now you're talking about the entire commission of people who show up at the shows and officiate the shows and approve things and things like that. Lorenzo did never needed $40,000 a year salary kind of thing, right? So I assume he was a volunteer there, but now you've got a billionaire in an office where everybody's making back then probably the Nevada Boxing Commissioner made $150,000 a year, decent salary, a good salary, right? But now you've got a billionaire in there, and there's no way you're going to tell me that they weren't able to exude some type of influence, and that they weren't listened to a little more closely, and that they weren't given a little more attention, and that their wants and needs were taken care of. So he leaves the boxing commission and goes to the New Jersey Boxing Commission, and New Jersey is also an extensive commission. There was a moment where Larry Hazard is a commissioner, I think still. There was a moment where a long time when I was matchmaking in Jersey, Larry Hazard was a commissioner, and he stepped down for a while. And I actually applied for that job, for the New Jersey State Boxing Commission job. Um, and that came with an apartment in Newark, $120,000 a year, and a car. So, again, you're $120,000 a year. You should be able to live a comfortable life, save some money, retire after 20, 30 years, if you're able to make it that long, and live out the rest of your life. It's comfortable. You're also a state employee, so I assume you're getting health insurance and a few other things like that. So the commission jobs, I'm not poo-pooing them. But when you compare it to a casino owner billionaire, now you're talking about people that you have to react to people like that. So, and Dana's been in Vegas now long enough, and he's got his own money. And, I saw recently where he was talking about stopping drinking because the casino called him up and he was like, "Hey, I'm going back there. I know you got, some of my money there." And the casino informed him that he had lost a couple of $1 million, right? So again, you're talking about another level of player, like just a higher level of player, and people that are used to moving things, getting things done, and stuff like that. So, there's people even say, "Oh, Andy Foster, he gets kickbacks or this, that, the other thing." I don't even necessarily think that you do that, but I think people of power like that get bureaucrats who naturally react to them and want to be on their side, want to be friends with them and things like that. So, how much effort is going to go? I still see a lot of holes, and I still see ways that Dana's going to have an uphill battle heading into the boxing world. And that's because of the complication of the contracts, the prestige of the titles, which his titles won't have unless he's able to get a couple of Crawford, Canelo, Naoya Inoue type of level fighters, Tyson Fury, so some of the highest level guys in the game. Unless he's going to be able to get them involved in his title picture, his titles are going to lack prestige for many years. Um, but one of the things that I caution, now that this has happened, and you see, like you said, something kind of moved there under the radar to make this happen, and there are forces in play here. You do have to recognize that, especially if he's backed by Saudi money or those people as well as Endeavor, then Dana just picked Eddie Hearn, Oscar De La Hoya, and Top Rank to be B-level players. Those companies all have hundreds of millions of dollars, but they don't have tens of billions of dollars, and Dana does. Now, at his command, with Endeavor and with possibly Saudi money backing him and doing the talk there, now he is the biggest player in the game. That, in and of itself, makes it more interesting to me to see how this is going to go. The good. Does this California? What does this do? I don't know what this does. Does it mean in California? It doesn't change the Ali Act as a something that the Senate worked on and passed and affects all of boxing, right? It's just in
I would think it
California.
only affects it in California, yeah. So some boxers could
Right. So
choose not to
California
fight
doesn't
there.
right, and California doesn't dictate for everybody, but could it have a domino effect? Could Jersey be next, and then Nevada will certainly. That'll be interesting to see when Nevada approves it, because Nevada is Dana's hometown. Did he choose to do California first to not, you know, then because Nevada's a no-brainer, or to not let Nevada go first because it would really look bad because it's his hometown and where he's been a power player for more than 2 decades.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot in motion there, but it's a dangerous move because one of the things I've always thought is, you know, Dana's older now. He seems to be a little bit spread out among, projects like, even we make fun of
Slapstick,
power fit, yes,
slapstick,
slapstick or power fisting or whatever you want to call
power
it.
slap.
Um, And there was talk about him entering the BMX world and you know uh, motorcycle racing, motocross. Um, he's also spends a lot of time on public appearances where he's become like a business personality too, where they talk about his rise and things like that. And they're not so much talking about the best fighter of all time anymore. They're talking about him and his rise as a as a businessman and what he did with the sports business that he took from basically war memorials to the top shelf, right? So he's spread out, and I think boxing was going to require more of his attention, but maybe behind the scenes he is dedicated to this, and that makes it dangerous. We're going to see what their next moves are, but there's still a few. This isn't a checkmate type of move. I don't think that this California state approval. This is you know, a strong opening in a chess game. But it's not a checkmate. They're still a long way away from controlling and being a power player in boxing. But they've got more money than everybody else by a lot, and he's got a history of getting things done that you really, especially one way or another, however he did it, whether he destroyed the competition, whether he did it by a monopoly and stuff like that. The UFC is where it is today because of him and his energy and effort. And if he applies that to boxing, it's going to be interesting to see how fast they can move. I still would stand on the 5 to 10 year time frame of dedication to make this happen. If you look at it, when they bought the UFC in late 2000, early 2001, it took them about 2 or 3 years to by the you could say by 2007 they were already really mainstream. That's 5 or 6 years. Maybe 2004 they were already getting rid of the competition and already on their way, kind of thing. So it took them 2 or 3 years there, but they only had to deal with Pride, who was a dying company anyway, and then everybody else was not even a B player like I described Top Rank and the other boxing companies. Everybody was D and E
Yeah.
players, in MMA, and Dana really didn't, kind of caught people off guard. People thought, we're still of the, including myself, we're still of the opinion that MMA is kind of like a community, and we all know each other, and we want to work with each other, and we're all trying to get the sport to be bigger, and that kind of like whole hands and skip in the grass kind of mentality that you know when you looked up you were like shit, we just got run over, right? I don't think he's going to be able to do, like, I mean, Eddie Hearn, Oscar De La Hoya released a video that you sent me to, where he's giving Dana the finger and using Dana type language on Dana. um Boxing's a little more entrenched, a little more, there is more strength there to hold off and defend. And I think it'll be an up and down game. I still think it'll be 5 or 10 years of full dedication before they can dominate boxing.
Let's talk about the De La Hoya video. I sent that to you. Kind of what was your reaction to it? Obviously, he wasn't happy about this getting passed the way it was because he was expecting it to be delayed. He had kind of brought that up. He had even, how can I say it, complimented them for delaying it, for actually saying, okay, we listened to some people, but, now that they passed it kind of just without anyone knowing, really, he was pretty mad. But, none of them, to their defense, the Revival Act people, the UFC, TKO, none of these boxing promoters came out against it. They weren't on the call saying we shouldn't do this. They were saying it in public, but not on the calls.
Yeah, did they even know about it? About
Well, they
the call?
did the first time they knew. Other people knew, so how did they not know?
Well, the voting, it's to me, what I noticed was I think the call and the public participation on the call amounted to 90 people, right? Is that one of the numbers that was out there? So there were 90 people involved in the back and forth. That's not really a good cross uh, section of boxing or the sport or anything like that. It seems to me like it was almost like per show, And yeah, why? Yeah, you're right. The boxing people do have some uh complicity is not the right word, but do have they should take the blame for not being there and defending their interests. But you wonder again with the influences of the boxing commissions and with the fact that this kind of vote, we were told the vote was happening. We weren't told, hey, Friday we're voting. I didn't hear that. I don't think you heard that. I think what we heard was hey, we voted Friday, like it was already done. So I think that the information about this was not as widespread as it should have been for the importance that it has. It does have that feeling of um machination. Somebody, you know, got this done on the down low a little bit, and now it's done. And some people are looking up again with that feeling of like Dana just ran us over with a truck, and we didn't even catch the license plate on it. Um, when I see De La Hoya's video, at the end of the day, De La Hoya was an Olympic boxer in his day, probably the best boxer in the world for a window of time. Um, that gave him his money. That gave him knowledge of the business so that he could become the Golden Boy promoter. Golden Boy was his nickname, right? So Golden Boy Promotions is him and his entity and stuff. But I don't, and having money, obviously, and controlling Canelo for as long as he did, and he's had some other talent come under his radar that he controls, So, and obviously, he's going to be a good judge of talent and recognize talent and things like that. But he has a little bit of a like I can't take him 100% seriously. You know what I mean? He uh, he's had drug problems. He's been in front of yeah. He's been more visible on his drug use in public and doing promotions than Conor McGregor has. Back in the day. Now he's an older guy and he's probably at least dabbling a lot less. If he's not completely sober, I don't know. Um, Videos like yesterday, where or like the one you shared with me yesterday, where he's cursing and doing things like that, make you wonder if every once in a while he's not doing something stupid because he's another guy that I don't think he has too many people that tell him what to do. He's the guy calling the shots, right? Um, and then yeah, and it's I don't really care, I don't want to bring it up and stuff, but when you've appeared on the internet with, you know, dressed up as a woman and, in a sexual encounter where, you know, uh, uh, some things that, uh, people will question that, you know? So I think Eddie Hearn's a more serious opponent for Dana because Hearn is, and Hearn's operates in England, so I don't know, nitty gritty or dirt on him, but at least he's more private. At least he's a second generation boxing guy, and he's always kind of had his product. I think he made a grave mistake putting all his eggs in the Anthony Joshua basket. Back, a few years back when he did. Um, but like I think he's more serious. I think Top Rank is also if you look at it, if you're not going to take Golden Boy all that serious because you know maybe to compliment Dana, Dana is playing three-dimensional chess and De La Hoya plays checkers. I don't think De La Hoya is a smart or a smart businessman or a guy who's ready to take on Dana head on. Bob Arum could have done it, but you would have needed it to be 40 years ago. Bob's just about done at this point. So with Bob done, De La Hoya, people question whether if Dana applies pressure, he'll be taken more seriously than De La Hoya. And that really leaves like a few other promoters. I noticed Tom Loeffler was on the list of pro people for this, and he's another like a DeBella or like these other smaller promoters in boxing. So Dana's already started to find some people in the boxing world that are going to back him up. And it's going to be hard to resist. Right? So what do I think of De La Hoya? I think he probably should have kept that video on the down low and not in so public. I think what he's going to do is he's going to eventually, if Dana's serious about this and this doesn't become like a power slap thing where it's a side project for him, if Dana's serious about this, De La Hoya once again put himself right in Dana's headlights, and he's not going to be able to take that pressure.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a little bit about the big John McCarthy thing, because he's getting raked over the coals for this. You know, he recently, and in fact, I see like comments here, Big John McCarthy's a hypocrite. He recently quit his podcast to return to being a referee. If anyone has financial incentive to go along with this revival act, it's him.
Yeah, again, I would rate Big John as a guy that is probably way more famous than you would think he is if you looked at his bank account. In other words, I don't see where you could track like a life-changing payday anywhere along his MMA career. Um, so yeah, he's still looking to retire comfortably. I don't think he's got a couple million in the bank or anything like that. He does. He does. Maybe I missed it, but I don't think that, uh, his referee seminars and his referee certifications and things were enough to do it. Maybe they had a few years where he had a solid income from that. But that seems to obviously have been trailing off and not getting done. Um, he may have cashed in some big appearance fees as a face referee, as a person that is known as a referee, where technically under, especially in the United States, under boxing commissions, the referees make a pittance. In boxing, if you they if you're an experienced referee, the pay is in the boxing commission rules, and so you get paid X amount, a couple $100 for every match. But if you happen to get a world title fight and there's Mayweather type of money going around, at the end of the day, you get an envelope with a $25,000 check or something like that. That's like the Larry, not Larry Bird. One of the referees, his last name is Bird, the guy who did a lot of Mayweather fights. Um,
Adelaide Bird?
Adelaide, her husband, right? Her husband, I think, was a ref.
Oh,
So yeah, I'll look it
uh,
up here just to get his name right, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, so they do get like an appearance fee kind of money, and obviously, if he did fights overseas where somebody decided for a smaller show or for a regional show in Europe or in the Middle East or something like that, decided that they wanted to bring in John McCarthy for the you know for the fame and face of it, then he may have cashed in a couple of good fees, but no one's going to pay him, $5 million to referee a boxing or any type of show, right? Um, so yeah, that's how I would look at it. I would look at it as a situation where I think he's got less money than his fame would lead you to believe, and he's going to be moving back to refereeing again. He's hoping to get some of those $25,000 envelopes at the end of the world title fights. And what does this mean? That all of a sudden, and this is one of those things that always bothered me about bringing in the boxing commissions. Um, like what makes John McCarthy qualified to be a boxing ref?
nothing.
Yeah, I mean, he was a jiu-jitsu guy, and then, he started out as a referee in the UFC. I don't know if he's refereed boxing matches at this point, but
Well, he's not
If
a
he had
judge, so all he has to do is enforce the rules. You know.
right, but still, boxing is a little bit of a different sport. There's a little
Yeah.
bit of a nuance to it, and then there is a little bit of a pecking order too. You've got people who slogged away as a boxing referee for 15, 20 years, and now John McCarthy is going to walk in and put into boxing world title fights because of his fame, where other people have worked to do the groundwork to get up to that level and maybe earn, that little envelope with the bonus in it. So yeah,
Let me ask you
uh,
this. UFC just got burned, almost 400 million in this lawsuit, and I'm sure they had spent quite a bit in lawyers' fees also. I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm different, but if I was in charge, I would be like, okay, we just got burned on this thing. We might need to be careful of our public actions that might look like we're doing more of the same. Like with this Revival Act. Now we're doing something over here that's not probably not in the best interest of boxers either. You know, it's almost like they're doubling down on their public behavior that got them in trouble in the first place.
the boxing referee I was referring to
Oh,
under Mayweather is Kenny Bayless,
Kenny
not
Bayless, yeah, yeah.
Bird. Yeah. So yeah, and so those guys would get, at that level, that everybody got paid on Mayweather's um, cards, and on world title fights, you expect to get a little bonus of all the money that's going around out there and stuff like that. But again, Big John, he's probably just trying to get on the UFC's good side, you know, and we'll see. We'll see if they actually pull off. I wouldn't be surprised if they actually do pull off the White House show that you see Big John make his comeback there as a referee.
Now, can you just comment on what I had said earlier? It seems like they're just doubling they already got hit by the train once, sort of. Not an ending blow, but now they're like jumping right back in front of the train again and being like, let's keep doing what we were doing that got us in trouble and not try to hide it at all. Why do you think they're doing that?
See, I think you're mischaracterizing the way they think about it.
Right, but
I think,
yeah, make sense of it for me.
again, they're still pulling in. It didn't affect their bottom line in terms of profitability. They're still making money. So, and that's the bottom line, right? So whatever payout they had to make the first time to the fighters, and whatever payout comes in the future, if they're able to mitigate that and make the payment, but it doesn't really affect their business, doesn't really affect their bottom line, then they haven't lost. They haven't lost anything. And that's my argument with the settlement that happened the first time, is that it was an insignificant amount of money to a company that big. It was something that Dana could have paid out of, if his net worth on the internet is anywhere near what they say it is. Dana himself could have paid out the settlement from his own money and still had nine figures worth of money left.
Right.
So it really, when we say they lost, they don't look at it that way. They don't look at it that way at all. And they're going to use the same tactics and the same things that have worked for them in the past. And again, so now what we to play it out, what would happen is they enter boxing, they spend 5 years or so getting themselves to the point where, if they go to like the premier boxing champions and they come out with a big blast of a series of shows and TV shows, and a couple of years of making fights that are worth it, and world title fights, and going to, putting people in, you know, um, Madison Square Garden, and where the Brooklyn Nets play, and the arenas in California, the arenas in Nevada, and doing huge shows, and they do it for 2 years, and then the premier boxing champion starts to tail off. It doesn't start to pay off and stuff. So if we know what Dana and those guys would do, is they would continue to fund it and still continue to try to keep it at that same level without taking a drop down. And now once you get into year 3, 4, and 5, without a drop off where people say, the product's not that good, then it has a chance of lifting off. I think that's what they'll do. I think that's what'll happen is they'll come out, they'll do what they can do, and then unlike other companies where they start to trail off, they will not trail off, even if they have to go into the red to do it in order to prove a point, and then kind of bluster their way in. And it's worked for them in the past. There's no reason to change your tactics. They've never ever been hurt. He's, everything.
But
Punching your
they've
wife
never
in,
lost like that before either. And if I was the
but
judge,
again,
if
you're
I
you're
was the
calling it
judge
a.
and I see this come across my newswire, I'd be pretty pissed because I'd be like, "Look, I just sat in on a trial, this situation, and not only are they not stopping, now they want to do it in boxing." If I was the judge
Sure.
involved in that, like it'd be almost like, okay, this guy got off with a murder, but if I'm a judge and you come in my courtroom again and I get a chance to sentence you, if you get convicted, I'm gonna drop the hammer on you this time. You know,
Yeah, but again,
to me, it just
here
seems kind of like
you
irresponsible.
but you said they never took a loss like that before, but you're quantifying it as a loss. It's not a loss. What did they really lose?
Well, I don't
Four
think they
hundred
wanted
million
to pay.
dollars?
I don't think they wanted to pay that out to fighters because they don't want to pay them. Period.
No, I understand. I understand if they could have paid zero, they would have paid
They would
zero.
have much
Obviously,
preferred
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
But if they have the amount of money they have, it's I saw. I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's kind of like a
Yeah.
famous scientist, also like a personality on the internet and stuff. And he was talking about um, how, he's got enough money put away that, he probably wouldn't pick up a penny or a nickel on the floor. But a quarter might be something he picks up because, and this is a story from many years ago, something he picks up because, he said, I could still do laundry with it, or I could still make a phone call with it. This is, again, maybe 20 years ago, his story. And he sat down because he's a scientist and a mathematician, and he extrapolated and he said, so if I take my net worth and a quarter is worth me picking up, if you take Bill Gates's net worth, how much money would have to be on the floor for it to be worth Bill Gates's time to pick up? And he quantified it at $40,000. So Bill Gates would walk by $20,000 because it's not even worth his time to pick up, just like a nickel isn't worth Neil deGrasse Tyson's time to pick up. So, and that's what I'm talking about in the levels of the money they have. They were not hurt. They did not take a loss. They actually probably laughed in the back and said, "That's all we have to pay. Pay it. Let's get this done with." It's not a loss in their eyes. Maybe other people quantify it as a loss. In some ways, you're right. It's a definite little bit of a black eye, especially it's the first official questioning of their business model and stuff. But I don't think they look at it that way at all. I think they look at it as like, you're kidding me. That's all we have to pay. Let's do it. Let's get this going and keep going forward. They didn't take away any of our business practices. They didn't take away any of our rights to do it. And if we can pull it off again in boxing, we strengthen our position because we now have two sports that we're managing in the same fashion.
But you got to remember, they got another class lawsuit. This isn't the only one. So they're saying, all right, that's all we have to pay. Let's see if we can blow ourselves up worse this time. We'll do something that is completely the wrong thing to be doing publicly, and maybe the
What have
judge
you
will put $1 billion on us this time. That would
what
be a
have you
great
heard?
idea.
But what have you heard about the second class action lawsuit? When is
Well,
that
that
coming to trial? When are we going to see that again? We
we
don't
don't
even have
know that, but
dates.
what I'm
Yeah,
saying,
of course.
true,
So
but
who
me or
cares?
you, would you want to say, okay, I'm going to risk blowing myself up completely? You don't have to do it this outlandishly. You could try to pass this without being as over the top and about it. You know what I mean? You could still
That might
accomplish
be.
what you're trying to accomplish, but it's almost like they want to get in front of the train and see if it'll hit them.
I think that
Let's see if it'll run me over this time. Last time it just knocked me off the track. I want to see if the train will kill me this time. You know what I mean?
yeah, I think again. I think I think you're missing Dana's gambler's mentality. I think Dana would do it that way. I think
But I think the
as out,
TKO guys aren't him though.
yeah, but that's okay because at the end of the day, the TKO guys are making money, and we don't really know exactly how they are. You know, they're people consider them to be you know kind of behind the scenes Illuminati type people that that have fortunes that they toss around and stuff like that. We don't really know how they are. The pictures I've seen of what's his name, Emmanuel. What's the chairman's name?
Emmanuel, you mean of TKO?
Yeah,
Oh,
Rahm Emanuel. It's not
yeah,
Rahm
yeah.
Emanuel.
It's Ari, his
Sorry,
brother.
Emmanuel. Okay. Yeah,
Rom is
yeah.
his brother. He was
Okay,
mayor of
so
Chicago.
so yeah. Again, my favorite ego thing of these guys is when you see all these rich billionaires and stuff like that, and Dana and everybody there, and the chairman is the guy sitting there, a little skinny dweeb with the UFC belt around his shoulder. There are egos there, but and when you play at that level and you've had the level of success they've had, yeah, I think their willingness to gamble is what they consider got them there in the first place. So, like you said, double down. And that's exactly the language you should be using here. That is the double down mentality. Dana is a guy who, you know, he's a famous gambler, banned from casinos because of his style of gambling and because of his in your face style of, I go in with 75,000 bucks. I win three hands in a row. I just made $250,000 all of a sudden in 5 minutes. I cash out and go home. Casino hates that. That's why they would ban him. And then, but if he loses 250,000 in 5 minutes, he has enough money to come back in and play until he gets his money back and breaks even. And if he has every once in a while a bad day or a bad loss or something like that, in his style of play, he does make it back the next time out. So a loss is just it's a temporary loss. It reminds me of another one of those guys that had more money than most people, um, who was a manager, um, and we in Las Vegas. There was a big roulette wheel where you could put money on the chip, and and spin the wheel, and you have a chance at winning something. And he put a $50,000 bet down and lost it. And there was a group of his friends and people there who were kind of making fun of him. And he kind of went and looked at his watch for about 30 seconds and said, "Oh, don't worry, I made it back." So since the lawsuit settled, the UFC has probably made that money back in profits already.
Hmm.
So that's how I think they look at it. A very aggressive, very counterintuitive to, like, if I had $250,000 in wins, I would go home too, but I'd never go back to a casino again. you know, type in. Um, but these guys keep trying it. They keep going back for it. It's their adrenaline rush. And I think that's what you're looking at. And that's the dangerous part about Dana is that if Dana's adrenaline flap hits open and he gets that same buzz he got by being aggressive and doing what he did when he was younger, then who knows what they're capable of doing in this sport.
But you got to think the class of lawyers are chomping at the bit here because they can say, "Look, Judge, you ruled on this much money," and not only are they completely ignoring your ruling, they're just gleefully they're thumbing they're sticking their finger in your eye. They don't have any respect
Yeah,
for this ruling.
at the end of the day, when they accept it, when the fighters and the lawyers on the other side of the lawsuit accepted the settlement, they also accepted taking absolutely no chance at changing their business practices. So they did it to themselves.
No, the next one does have that. The
Yeah,
Johnson one and the one
no,
that
no, 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 it
Phil
doesn't.
Davis
It doesn't.
filed.
Not until it's settled will we know if it has it. It's in
Yeah,
there
yeah.
now, but it was in there now before.
Well,
It
John
was
Fitch
in.
talked about that on my thing, how they would have to go back through. They didn't have to provide the time to provide fair market data had passed. That's why they weren't, end up having to settle the way they did. But what I'm saying is, for me, I feel like this is good for my argument if I'm one of the trial lawyers or I'm one of the class lawyers. Because,
Yeah, I don't think so.
yeah, I don't know. Because
Oh,
to
yeah,
me,
you may be
maybe
right. I mean,
I
it's an
think Eddie
interesting
Hearn, for example, I
conversation.
think Eddie Hearn, if he got away with something like that, I think he'd be much more careful about what he did the next time. That's where I
Yeah,
think
but
the two differ.
Eddie's
I
not.
think he'd be like, okay, I'm going to be careful about how I may do the same thing again, but I'm going to
Eddie's
be,
not a Vegas.
yeah,
Eddie's not a Vegas gambler who's had
yeah,
all his shit come out smelling like roses for the last 20 years. And if it doesn't smell like roses, you move on into the rose bush so that it smells like roses again, and you ignore your little losses. You've never Dana's never in his eyes. Dana's never lost once,
you're
and
right.
you could count Power Slap as maybe not being again. He punched his wife in the face on video,
Yeah, yeah, he did.
and he's still invited to podcasts and invited to
Hmm.
presidential election, um, uh, conventions, and is still a guest of honor in places and stuff like that. The guy doesn't take losses, and when he gets something that could be a loss for other people, he somehow gets through it and survives it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I just feel like that's a risk that could blow up in their face, but especially when you consider there's other entities out there. If there were no other entities, if Matchroom didn't exist, if Top Rank didn't exist, Golden Boy didn't exist, then I don't care if I'm doing something and I get burned on some money. Big deal. There's no competition. No one's going to be able to go to anyone and ask them to match my contract. But you got these three other entities out here, and now if I start blowing myself up, I'm empowering them.
Again, you have to, for this to play out in boxing, you have to give them time to operate.
Yeah.
Give the business practices time to accumulate enough people for a class action suit. And then how long did they delay these other lawsuits and settlements and stuff? You're
Yeah.
talking about they're going to be able to act for 10 or 15 years before anybody even can look up and say they did it again in boxing. And we've got the proof, and we've got the fighters who are upset that they could have made more money. We've got Dana walking around with $10 billion in the bank now instead of $1 billion. So yeah, they did it again. For it to be actual, now it's all speculation. They're just going into the sport in kind of the same way, but we don't know. We don't have any proof. We can't, we have. There's no action yet. So Dana's going to be long dead before
Yeah,
and walk
probably.
and before any of that stuff actually plays out in court. And again, in the second lawsuit, there's and the Phil Davis suit afterwards, and whatever happened to Mark Hunt's suit. You know, people think suing them is a big deal. They love for you to sue them. It's a horrible idea in general the way the court systems work. And I'm not saying it's a good thing, but I'm saying the way in general court systems work, it's a horrible idea to sue someone with a lot more money than you because they will wear you out. They will pay the lawyers, and the lawyers will show up and say, "We need an extension. We need this. We need this. We're doing this and this and this." And then another 6 months and another 6 months. And they put it out. The pittance of a lawsuit and a payout that the fighters got with the first one came after a judge said it's not enough the first time, so we're going to delay it again, and then we'll make a decision and see what kind of offer we get. Yet another delay and a delay, but that one took 10, almost a decade, I would suspect,
Yeah. Yeah.
before anybody passed a check,
Yeah.
and all kinds of things. Now they're doing a lot of their shows in Saudi Arabia and in the United Arab Emirates, and yeah, they're still in Vegas and doing shows like that. But they're even they're not in London or in shows places like that, but they're overseas now a lot more, where there's a lot less accountability, a lot
Right.
less transparency, and a lot less any type of repercussion that can come to them from the American court system when they're doing business in other countries.
Yeah.
So yeah, there and boxing could very well turn into that. Whereas, what if they started to do boxing as an international, uh, kind of like not in the United States, or you did 25% of their shows in the United States, then they'll feel nothing from a lawsuit.
Yeah. It's an interesting point. You just brought up a lot. They're able to circumvent it anyway, even if they don't get this
Yeah,
Revival Act changed. They can just do their shows elsewhere where the rules don't apply.
yeah, and we'll see again if they can get some of the big name boxers to fight for them one way or another. In other words, if the boxers breach their contracts that exist, or allow them to expire, or whatever the um however they do it, if they can get some of the big names in boxing to operate for their world titles, then this will happen a little bit faster than I suspect. But I suspect that there are a few lines like that that will be difficult for them to overcome with anything but letting time go by. What you'd have to have is, yeah, and what happens, again, the structure of boxing is different, but what happens if Eddie Hearn has got, say, Anthony Joshua still signed to like a 10 fight deal, and he decides to, yeah, I'm just going to sit and not give you fights, because that's what Dana used to do, right? Dana, if he wanted you re-signed or kept on or renegotiated, he wouldn't give you a fight, so you'd have to spend a year without a payday, and that became a problem. So how do you get the big name fighters? Because you have to, and that'll be interesting to see what Dana's plan to execute this is, because this won't work building it up as a grassroots thing with young boxers and looking for talent. And he does that on Dana White's Contender Show.
Mhm.
But and the progression happens there. But Dana White's Contender Show, you'd have to multiply that by 10 times to really have any effect on boxing. You could do that, I guess, and have a show in England, and have a show in Japan, and have a show in China, and have a show in India, and have a show in wherever else is, about Argentina, Mexico, United States, Canada, and start looking for guys from scratch. But once guys like you've got, like, for example, I guess I don't really watch Dana White's Contender Show. Um, but maybe the biggest name that's come from there is that young kid Rosas, right?
Yeah, and they've had some guys. I mean, Jamal Hill became a champion. He was on there.
Okay.
So they've
So
had
you
some.
so one champion has come out of years and years and years of Dana White's show. So they have to come up with a different formula to get to the top guys in boxing that already exist, and to get them to fight under their flag. How will they do that? That's what will be interesting. If not, like I said, this is a 5 to 10 year plan to take it over. So we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, fascinating stuff as always, Miguel. I think you kind of break down, like I was saying at the beginning of the show. I think you're one of the few people who can talk about the why rather than just the what. You know,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
what happened, but you do a job of explaining the why, or why it could be that this stuff is happening.
and I think the factor here is, and I don't think you could quantify me as a Dana fan. I'm, you know, I would qualify more as a Dana victim. Yeah. But
Yeah, yeah,
but when you're watching something like that, you I, like I said, impress isn't the right word, but he leaves me with my mouth open a lot with what he gets away with. Like, we've mentioned a couple of things here, mistakes that would kill other companies don't kill him. Why does that happen? And he's got that type A force of nature type personality where, I maybe I think in the early days it certainly qualified that he outworked everybody. I think he's got a cutthroat mentality when it comes to business that other people don't share. And if you don't share it and he's playing under those rules, he's going to win. And again, if he's not registering and taking any losses, this is more about, can Dana rekindle the ego to the way it was when he was hungry and coming up and get that adrenaline buzz of actually doing things nonstop again. And that's how far this will go. It's all going to be on the amount of energy Dana puts into it.
Yeah. Well, everyone, we appreciate you guys stopping by, checking out another episode. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, and share these shows with other MMA fans, people that want to learn more about the sport than they might from other podcasts. And Miguel, I always appreciate your time and all your wisdom. And
thank you, sir. Hey, always fun to be on here, and glad that we've pulled off a couple of weekends of taping.
Yeah.
Try to keep it going here.
Yeah. Well, everybody, we appreciate you checking out the latest episode. And until next time, catch us on the other side. Take care.
Hey, I'm Jacob Cooperman, and you were watching the MMA Conspiracy Hour with Todd Atkins and Miguel Iturrate. Todd has been involved in covering combat sports since the 1990s, and Miguel has match-made over 200 different events amongst various promotions worldwide. Please subscribe and be on the lookout for future episodes. As for me, you can check me out at Gloves Up on YouTube and Coop TV with 3 O's on Instagram. Thank you guys, and enjoy the episode.